They wanted me to look at cases where babies had either died in unusual circumstances or had collapsed in unusual circumstances, and wanted me to give an opinion on whether I thought it was natural causes or whether I thought there was anything unusual about the way that these children had either died or collapsed.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. What is the strongest evidence implicating Lucy Letby? Is it, as some apologists are claiming, an entirely circumstantial case? Does it simply come down to Lucy being at the wrong place, at the wrong time, 7 times over the course of 12 months? In my opinion, there's not really an eyewitness scenario in this case, or if there is, it's not particularly compelling evidence. In other words, the best evidence isn't that someone caught Lucy in flagrante delicto. Instead, the best evidence comes from x-rays and autopsy reports that were viewed 4 years after the fact. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Thank you to the thousands of you who have subscribed. If you're finding this analysis useful, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started.
So although it wasn't obvious to other people, it was very clear to me and also to Dr. Evans that some sort of foul play or some sort of unnatural act had befallen these children. And it wasn't our role to say who had done that. It was our role to say that something very unusual had happened and what we thought had happened.
Enter Dr. Sandy Bowen, who was brought in by police in 2019 to investigate why so many premature babies had died on the neonatal ward. Now, bear in mind, this crime sort of has been kept at 2016. It started, as far as we know, in 2015, so at least 3 to 4 years after the events, Dr. Sandy Bowen was brought in to look at the information, to analyze it. She was basically the law enforcement and the state's expert witness. And what she said when she saw the x-rays, she said, "It can't be. I've never seen anything like this in my career." But she basically also said nothing else could explain what she was seeing. She said the x-rays were right in front of her, several of them, and all of these x-rays, without exception, were showing air in the baby's vessels. In other words, air bubbles in the baby's vessels. And she said, that is when I thought, no, those have to be air bubbles and it has to be deliberate. So can you see, there's no doubt that what happened to the dead babies in 5 of 7 cases was due to air bubbles. Now, according to a research paper on air embolisms in babies, and this was written by scientists from the University of Western Ontario, that's Canada, it was written in 1989, it described migrating discoloration of the skin, which typically manifests itself as pale with flitting bright pink patches. So basically, this study was confirming the configuration seen on these little babies, these blotches. According to the article, this strange rash became a hallmark of the case and was witnessed by different doctors in 5 of the babies: baby A, baby B, baby D, baby M, and baby O. And these configurations were noticed either prior to death, just prior to death, or while they were being resuscitated. Could this situation have been accidental? Well, apparently air could not be injected accidentally, according to the experts, because nurses had the dangers of air getting into lines and cannulas drilled into them during their training. In other words, if nurses were repeatedly told how to avoid harming babies, specifically in terms of this air bubble thing, a sadistic nurse could theoretically also be offered the simple tools for how to do so. If she's being educated on what not to do and what can be the result, well, a particularly opportunistic evil nurse might take that information and use it sadistically. This does suggest that A, the air bubbles didn't happen naturally, B, a nurse likely intervened, a nurse, and C, intervened not in an effort of care and prevention, but as quick, easy, a deliberate and invisible way of bringing about a collapse or fatal end result. Of course, it was only invisible if you weren't paying attention, if you weren't looking closely. When you did look closely, two clear observable patterns emerged. Firstly, when looking at x-rays taken just before their deaths, it showed excessive amounts of gas or air bubbles in their bowels. The scientists explained that while the baby's tissues and muscles were starved of oxygen during their collapses, causing those tissues to appear white, while the pink patches could be explained because air injected into the circulation was now temporarily oxygenating red blood cells as it came into contact with them inside the blood vessels themselves. So can you see there are three possible ways a baby under Lucy's care could have died? By accident, in other words, unintentionally, deliberately by Lucy, or deliberately by someone else. I think it's important to point out that air embolisms are extremely rare in nature. In other words, they very rarely manifest by themselves under ordinary circumstances. They can happen naturally, for example, from ascending too quickly during a deep water dive, or unintentionally during certain medical procedures such as operations, injections, and catheterization. So it's clear that a nurse was likely behind the unusual number of air embolisms here. The issue then becomes, was it intentional, was it reckless, or was it accidental? According to an article in the Daily Mail, only in the cases of baby F and baby L, the baby boys from two separate sets of twins who fell ill on the unit 8 months apart, was the medical evidence beyond doubt. Even Letby herself conceded there was no disputing results of specialist tests on their blood, which proved both had been poisoned by insulin. She accepted they had been poisoned but insisted she wasn't responsible. In the end, the jury refused to believe that another poisoner was at work on the ward and concluded she had tried to kill them. Now, besides air bubbles and poisoning, there was another disturbing pattern. Circumstantially, there was something else taking place frequently in the neonatal ward that was highly unusual: screaming babies. According to the article, Dr. Sandy Bowen was struck by accounts from parents and medics of the babies screaming before they collapsed and died. Harrowing accounts told how the defenseless children cried out for up to 30 minutes at a time, despite it being extremely rare for premature babies to scream at all. Dr. Bowen said the grim reality was that each baby was effectively suffering a heart attack after Letby injected air into their bloodstreams or stomach, causing lethal bubbles. This was a clear indicator that as a direct and immediate result of the baby killer actions, infants would begin to cry out as a result of acute physical distress. Indeed, this was likely part of the point, to initiate a crisis, meaning if the babies didn't cry, then there would not be drama or doctors summoned to Lucy's ward. It's also clear that the screaming would not only be loud and clear, but that to repeatedly initiate this process shows a sadistic lack of empathy for those in her care, because she would obviously have anticipated each time what would happen, and then it does happen. And obviously it is babies that are experiencing extreme pain. Probably when infants started to scream after Lucy had done her worst, she felt a swelling sense of satisfaction that what she was trying to do was working. According to the article, the screams of agony could be heard outside the unit. I remember the mother of one of the babies said she could hear in the corridor her child making a noise that a baby should never be making. That will be forever etched on her memory. That's according to Dr. Bowen. Dr. Bowen also told the Sunday Times to have a premature baby screaming is really unusual. What was described on the ward was babies screaming for up to 30 minutes. That is just unheard of. Somebody had done something to cause those babies extreme pain. Now, I have to say, my early impressions of this case was of a potentially inexperienced nurse who may have felt herself overwhelmed by the noise, the traffic, the frenzy, the demands, the cacophony in an understaffed situation. And so she killed babies to effectively perhaps lighten her workload. But having studied this case in more detail, one imagines these wards instead to be the opposite, very quiet. The babies like seeds or cocoons lying quietly, almost inert, in the semi-darkness. And this raises the question, while alone on night duty, did Lucy do what she did out of boredom? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.